Yes. Who would like to read the pink one?
Yeah, I'll go, Monica.
Yes.
Out of apprenticeship to ignorance, wisdom appraised him to hear mastercraft, and made him an archmason of the soul, a builder of the immortal's secret house, an aspirant to supernal timelessness. Freedom and empire called him from on high, above mind's twilight and life's star-led night. There gleamed the dawn of a spiritual day.
Should I start?
Yes, please. Yeah.
As so he grew into his larger self, humanity framed his movements less and less. A greater being saw a greater world, a fearless will for knowledge dared to erase the lines of safety. Reason draws that bar, minds soar, souls dive into the infinite. Even his first steps broke our small earth bounds, and loitered in a vaster, freer air.
In hands sustained by a transfiguring might, he caught up lightly like a giant's bow, left slumbering in a sealed and secret cave the powers that sleep unused in man within. He made of miracle a normal act, and turned to a common part of divine works, magnificently natural at this height, efforts that would shatter the strength of mortal hearts, pursued in a royalty of mighty ease, aims too sublime for nature's daily will, the gifts of the spirit crowding came to him.
They were his life's pattern and his privilege. A pure perception lent its lucent joy. Its intimate vision waited not to think. It enveloped all nature in a single glance. It looked into the very self of things. Deceived no more by form, he saw the soul.
In In beings it knew what lurked to them unknown. It seized the idea in mind, the wish in the heart. It plucked out from grey folds of secrecy the motive which from their own sight men hide. He felt the beating life in other men. Invade him with their happiness and their grief, their love, their anger, their unspoken hopes, entered in currents or in pouring waves into the immobile ocean of his calm.
Yes, thank you. So all this we had covered last few sessions, and just kind of making an overlap here. So we were reading that the power of direct perception, where the mind does not have to interfere, became available to Ashwapati. When it is said here, यहाँ पे, this one, a pure perception lent its lucent joy. A pure perception, so direct knowing. There are many times in our life where we just know. So there is no logic, no reason. There is pure knowing where the mind does not need to interfere why is this happening, why is this needed. There is no logical reason that or explanation that one needs to give to anyone, but one just knows. So this knowing, direct perception, became available to him, which usually in us is available to us also many moments of our life, but then it is masked by reason, intellect, or the vital, the emotions, the desires, the ambitions. It is always masked. So owing to this mask falling off for Ashwapati, this pure perception became available to him. Its intimate vision waited not to think. The thinking domain now is not necessary. It's like direct insight in, direct knowing, and it looked into the very self of things. So a person may be doing something and it may look an ugly action or ugly behavior, but what is the motive with which that person is doing? So what is it that he ultimately wants through that behavior? Because our behaviors are distortions of the ego. Ultimately, each one of us is seeking only contentment, right? So whatever act, whatever behavior we are indulging in is always a distortion, more or less, of the ego. And if we look at our intentions, we are all wanting peace, clarity, happiness, and contentment. And it is not wrong to demand that. It is just that it is available within us rather than seeking outside from external people and situations. So he was able to look into the very, very self of things, deceived no more by form, he saw the soul, right? So many, many times our own ideas and intentions are hidden from us. And what hides is the thought, the reason hides, and also the vital hides. Ambitions, greed, desire, they all keep on hiding what we really are wanting. So that hiding was not like an obstacle when Ashupati saw things now anymore. It plugged out from grey folds of secrecy the motives which from their own sight men hide. He felt the beating life in other men, and this also connected him directly with all the other people around. And what happened as a result was that he could feel their happinesses, their little happiness. He could feel the waves of happiness as if coming to him, and also their loss and grief and anger and all that. So owing to the fact that now he became more and more sensitive, the numbness disappeared. He also became more available to enjoy the waves of happiness or grief or loss or sadness of other people around. But he was not disturbed by those waves, owing to the fact that he was stationed in his calmness, in his poise, in his stillness. Whenever we call ourselves empath or being sensitive, we see that if other person is, unhappy or whatever, so we do experience that wave of current of sadness or unhappiness, but we ourselves get disturbed owing to that. Why? Because we usually are stationed in our story. We are stationed in a separate entity called ego, which is very limited. So that calm and still and poise, that is not available to the ego, because the ego itself is so insecure. So whenever a wave of happiness or a wave of grief, we are able to, kind of catch it from others, we ourselves are swayed very badly. But in case of Ashupati, this was not the case, because he was not stationed in the separate self. He was now stationed in his pure beingness, in his pure true being. And that was why he was able to utilize this oneness for a higher reason. Then what to do when so much of suffering exists, how to soothe it. Yeah. And if anything comes to you, please keep on sharing, unmute and share. So this is where we will read. Yeah.
This talk of
Yes.
Ashwapati, sometimes it feels to me as if it is Sri Aurobindo himself
Yes. Yes.
being.
Yes. It
Yeah.
is Sri Aurobindo only. Yes, you're right. Yeah.
We heard the inspired sound of his own thoughts re-echoed in the vault of other minds. The world's thought streams travelled into his ken, his inner self grew near to other selves, and bore a kinship's weight, a common tie, yet stood untouched, king of itself alone.
Yeah. So now thoughts, they come as inspirations, as if they are kind of in the atmosphere, and a person who is open to those inspirations is able to catch them. He heard the inspired sound of his own thoughts re-echoed in the vault of other minds. So vault is like a curved roof or a curved shed. So imagine that in a curved cave, the wall is curved, the roof is curved, and the whatever you say is getting echoed and it is getting back to you. So whatever inspirations came to him, they as if they went out in the world and they then resounding came back to him through other minds. And we think that these thoughts and inspirations are something of our own, like they are our personal uh, possessions, but they are not. They are available to each and every fellow. And one inspiration that may come in my mind, owing to the mind being receptive and porous, may also at the same time be going on with some other fellow, right? So it's very interesting, this phenomenon, and I'm sure we are only touching only the tip of it, right? So the thoughts that came to him as inspiration, they kind of go out from him and then come back as echoes from the vault of other minds, from the vault, as if it's kind of hitting those walls and then it is coming back. The world's thought streams traveled into his ken. So all these thought streams, and mother also used to say, if I'm not wrong, that she could see thought forms in the atmosphere. And that is why she said, be very careful of whatever you think, because you are actually creating matter by thinking. Because whenever matter is created, the at the first level it is the thought only, right? We have an idea, then we work on it, we have a will, then we keep on working, and then it forms into a matter. The idea of a bulb, the idea of a pen, the idea of a laptop, they all have emerged like that. So all these thought streams available in the world, the world's thought streams, traveled into his ken. Ken is something that I know, a domain of my knowledge. So usually we are so much into ourselves that we are not receptive to these thought streams. We are full of our stories. But when I'm empty of my stories in those moments in my life, at least, or to Ashwapati now, it has happened that he's empty of himself. So all these happenings of thought streams, all these inspirational ideas, they all traveled into his domain of knowledge, as if he became available to knowing those thought forms as if they are existing, they are there, which is commonly not available to us, these inspirations or these ideas. And owing to this, he also felt a strong oneness with people around. His inner self grew near to others' selves. The way normally on the ordinary consciousness we live, we are always so separatist. I'm in my own world, the other person is in own world, and we are always like stuck in our own worlds. But for Ashwapati, this veil of our my own world, it started to fall off, and it connected him to all the people around, as if it was a common commune that we are living in. And the thoughts are also common to everyone. They are not my thoughts or your thoughts. These are what happens to each one of us. So his inner self, owing to this oneness, grew as if in a communion nearer to other selves. and bore a kinship's weight, a common tie. Why a weight? Because he also became available to how grief, sorrow, sadness, confusion, chaos, guilt, shame, all these, they are so common to humanity, right? They actually, they are these tying threads. They tie us in oneness with each other. We all share these feelings, sensations, emotions. So it almost as if it was this weight, kinship's weight. Yes, I am related to you, and this is our common weight. You are not carrying it alone. I am also carrying it, right? Something like that. And owing to this and the emptiness that he was now, kind of free of his separate entity, yet stood untouched, king of itself alone. So all this commonness and oneness was also there, and yet something in me, something in Ashupati stood untouched, unperturbed by all that weight. And this is a possibility for each one of us. This is our birthright. We all have this capacity to get in touch with that unchanging element in us, which is always untouched by whatever confusion, chaos, thought, feeling I may be going on. People think that when one goes through these, the higher evolution or consciousness grows and grows, we become rid of thoughts and feelings and sensations. And it is not like that. Even masters and mystics have said that. It's thus that their grip is not anymore there. Otherwise I will be absorbed in me and my story and my thoughts, my feelings, my sensations, my body. But now more and more I am looking at myself as this untouched element, more and more as that. I see that the thoughts and feelings still exist, sensations are still there, even the stories may still exist, but they will not be able to have this hold over me. They will not be able to have me in their grip. So that grip is loosened, the grip of ignorance. And all those are just veils of ignorance, the veil of mental thoughts, the veil of stories, the veil of emotions. And only then we become capable of having deeper emotions, of compassion, of friendship, of communion with each other, of intimacy with each other, only when these outer veils of ignorance are shed. So it is not that one becomes numb or a stone to feelings, perceptions, and sensations. It is just that one becomes more sensitive. But that sensitivity is not a weakness, that sensitivity is pure strength, because you are standing in that aloneness which is available to each one of us.
When I was reading this out for you,
Yeah,
felt like there's some words which were like heavy. There were some words which were light.
yes.
And it's like, how everything is relative.
Hmm.
Like the weight helped him, right, to form the common tie. The like everything happened and yet he was untouched. So how beautifully it has been put, like both the our perceptions of certain things and how if you're untouched, it's
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yes. So again, as you said, it is not said that the weight was not there. The weight was there. Kinship's weight is there, and yet he is untouched. Yes.
Yeah, this is what I found really beautiful under Sri Aurobindo and Mother's teachings that,
Yeah.
life is as is, it's not kind of a, promise of a faraway land where
Yeah.
everything will be nice and white light and ponies.
Yeah.
It's very, yeah. That's why it seems like, it says it's everybody's story, right? Because everybody.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yes. Beautiful. Yes. Who would like to read next?
I'll go.
Yes, please.
A magical accord quickened and attuned to ethereal symphonies the old earthy strings. It raised the servitors of mind and life to be happy partners in the soul's response. Tissue and nerve were turned to sensitive chords, records of luster and ecstasy. It made the body's means the spirit's acolytes.
Yeah, a magical accord, as if everything is happening in a inner harmony now. Usually, if we, when we begin to wake up to our own self, the first thing that we notice is that we are actually in a state of disharmony most of the times. And it is not that the disharmony is now only when I am waking up. The disharmony was forever present, but I was asleep to the disharmony. And the more I get in touch with my own inner movements, as Mother has shared so many places beautifully, that Mother used to really watch her own inner movements very carefully, very sensitively. So the more we become available to this inner movements, the thoughts going up and downs, the feeling going ups and downs, and bodily sensations changing, all these movements, we see that we actually live in a state of disharmony most of the times, if not all. And this disharmony is obviously arising from ego, the separate self, which wants to use the whole instrument for itself. So, as if the whole of my life I am serving a phantom ghost which is not even there, which is just a conception of the mind, and I'm keeping on serving its kind of commands and commandments. I'm living on its dictates throughout a life. So now what happened with Ashwapati is that an inner harmony, a magical accord quickened. It kind of became more alive. Inner harmony became more alive and tuned and attuned. It started to get in tune with the ethereal symphonies, the to the old sorry to ethereal symphonies, the old earthy strings. So the mind and matter remain the same. The earthy strings are the same, the nature is the same. But now they are tuning themselves more and more, not to serve the demands of the separate self, the ego, which is always feeling incomplete, but to serve the spirit. Owing to the fact that the ego sublimated and it went back to its source, which is the spirit. Now, if we look it as a visual, as an imagery, imagine that in the ocean there is a wave. So the wave, the ultimate destiny of the wave is actually to fall back into the ocean. Wave is the ocean. Even when the wave is a wave, it is the ocean in that instance. So ego is not separate from its source. But the more I keep on focusing it on the wave as separate, the more I will be trying to protect it. And I will at the same time also see that it is so fleeting. Oh my God, I have to protect it. Oh my God, I have to protect it. But the destiny of the ego is to merge back in its source. Destiny of restlessness is to go back to rest. That is our own destiny. This is human destiny. And that is why in Mother's prayers and meditations, there is this certitude that Mother has, that there is nothing else possible but the divine. Ego cannot rule forever. The time will be over. And it becomes over for us in our individual journeys at separate instances of time. For you, it may be over now. At least the journey has begun. For some other fellow, the journey even has not kind of directly started, it has indirectly started. So at different points of time, we become capable of looking not at ourselves as the ego, as the separate self, but as servitors of the spirit. So this became more and more alive for Ashwapati. A magical harmony quickened. It got attuned to ethereal symphonies now to work for the spirit, the old earthy strings. Same strings now working for a different Lord. It raised the servitors of mind and life. Now, usually, if we look at our thoughts or if we look at our feelings and body, they're all serving the separate self, the limited self. Almost a lifetime passes by and we keep on serving the ego. and at the same time being our own enemy. Ego is the biggest falsehood because it is not even there, and yet we serve the ego. So now all these servitors of mind, the thoughts, intellect, reason, all that, and life, the vital, the emotions, the ambitions, the desires, all that, they were raised as if they were promoted now to be happy partners in the soul's response. Now they got their true master. They got a promotion. The master was now the spirit and not the ego or the separate self. Tissue and nerve were turned to sensitive chords. Now, again, being spiritual or falling back into our true nature does not mean that there is a numbness. There is far more, a greater intimacy to emotions and a greater sensitivity. Usually when I am eating, a plate full of rice may not be enough for the one who is consuming the rice. But for the one who is eating with sensitivity, 2 spoons may be just enough. And when I was reading this, it reminded me of that the story where Draupadi is there in the forest, and Krishna is there, comes to him, comes to Draupadi, and only 1 grain of rice is left in the pot, and he is just totally satiated with 1 grain of rice, and all the rishi munis which came to feast, who came to feast, they are also satiated. They weren't feeling hungry anymore. So this is extreme sensitivity which is full of strength. It is not a weak sensitivity. One touch is enough. One need not go through 1 hour of touching each other. And again, going even subtler, the physical touch may not be even necessary because one is so deeply connected that only one sensation, one perception, one oneness with each other is enough. So the sensitivity is so high. Tissue and nerve were turned to sensitive chords. Now they tuned in to spirit's sensations, which are very, very subtle. The movements are very subtle. They are not even heard, they are so subtle. Records of luster and ecstasy, it made the body's means the spirit's acolytes. The records of luster and ecstasy. So as if this new sensitivity that Ashupati got as a gift, they were vibrating as records, full of ecstasy, pure joy, pure illumination. Of no reason. There is no reason to that illumination. I haven't got something externally, and yet there is joy. And it kept on vibrating, almost like thrill in the cells. It made the body's means the spirit's acolytes. Now, acolytes, I was reading, listening to it, acolytes is, imagine that there is a priest and there is an assistant to the priest, a young boy, for example, who is helping the priest with making the arrangements for the puja or all that. So one who assists in these sacred services. So the bodies means the mind, the life, vital, and the sense perceptions, they all now turned as assistants to the spirit. They were not working for the ego anymore. They all kind of refined further and further in them, became more and more refiner. And this is again what Mother and Sri Aurobindo talk in integral yoga, refinement of the senses. Because this can only be done when nothing is in me is seeking completion through those senses. Otherwise, the way we live, we actually use the senses for consumption because something in me is so restless and incomplete, and it wants to seek to fulfill itself through external means, and that fulfillment almost never happens. It can never happen, right? So like this I cannot turn into refinement of senses. Like this I cannot turn into refinement of thoughts or sense perceptions or physical sensations. But when now nothing in me is wanting to fulfill itself, the sense of separate entity being a separate self is gone. Only now this integral yoga is possible, and that's why Mother and Sri Aurobindo say that in integral yoga, nirvana is the first step. Realization of the true nature is your first step in integral yoga. The refinement of vital, the refinement of mental thoughts, sense perceptions, bodily sense perceptions, they all come after one is working from that space within, which is not seeking anymore. This is the beauty, right? So the journey goes on, the journey continues. It does not stop with finding liberation or finding who you truly are. Yes. Yes. Yeah, who would like to read?
I'll go, Monica.
Yes.
A heavenlier function with a finer mode, lit with its grace, man's outward earthliness. The soul's experience of its deeper sheaths, no more slept drugged by matter's dominance.
Yeah. Now, what is happening is owing to this greater sensitivity and a feeling of oneness, a heavenlier function with a finer mode. This fine tuning is happening now. From coarseness, the fabric is becoming refiner, further refining, goes on and on. And this is the beauty of this path. One feels blessed to just to be on the path. Who is wanting the benefits of surrender? Who wants to reap the benefits of surrender? Just to constantly go on surrendering is a joy in itself. Makes you lighter and lighter and lighter. So this heavenlier function with a finer mode, fine tuning is happening. Lit with its grace, man's outward earthliness. Now all these earthy characters, the prakriti, the nature, mind, vital and sense perceptions are all part of nature, right? They all got lit up owing to the fact that Ashwapati is now stationed in his true being, which is untouched, imperturbable, untouched and unperturbable by all the external situations. And yes, still at the same time, extremely sensitive also, not numb to sense perceptions. Lit with its grace, man's outward earthliness, as if it's the matter is shining through that light that now is pouring in Ashwapati. The soul's experience of its deeper sheaths, no more slept drugged by matter's dominance. If you remember the first canto 1, we were reading too much about this, the fathomless zero of the inconscient, the abyss, as if it's a dead inert matter, this matter. And owing to the fact that it is so stony, almost like as if it does not have any sensitivity to the soul's light, it almost appears as that. So now owing to this greater sensitivity, as the soul's light is moving forward, the soul's experience of its deeper sheets. Now imagine that it may actually come to us that it is concentric circles almost, circle, then within it it's another circle, then within it it's another circle, and at the core of it, at the core of all the circles, lies our truer being. It may appear like that, but the way it is that the outer sheath and the outermost sheath, they are not untouched by the light of the true being, the core that is there at the center. There, the core at the center, the being at the center, is pervading through all those layers, and that is the sense of awareness that we talk of. you know that day other day we were talking in one of the sessions, if do you see a dead body, No one can see through those eyes which are in the dead body. So that awareness, that pure knowing, pure beingness, which was making the dead body actually alive, that now has been taken away from the body, right? So all these sheaths, which may appear as the outer sheaths, physical sheath, the vital sheath, the mental sheath, it may appear that they are untouched by the soul, but all they have, the aliveness in them, is actually the aliveness of the soul only. It is so obvious, and yet we keep on missing it for a lifetime. That the way I am able to move my hands, what is making me move my hands? Because hands by themselves cannot move. So that aliveness, that uh, life that is present in the body, which is making each and everything aware or purposeful, is the aliveness of the soul. So all those sheaths are actually permeated by that core that lies at the center of all these sheaths, which in Hindi we call as Pranamaya Kosha, Annamaya Kosha, all these Manomaya Kosha, the mental sheath, the vital sheath, the physical sheath. So they are all pervaded by this consciousness. Without the consciousness, they have nothing to themselves. They are just dead matter and nothing else. So now, owing to the fact that the Ashupati kind of was able to reach the core of his being, all these deeper sheaths, the subtle sheaths, the mental sheath, the vital sheath, the causal sheath, the body of bliss, as they say, in this literature, all they, all these sheaths kind of, became alive. They became more alive. They were not sleeping drugged by the numbness of the matter, always living in physical kind of, fulfillments, that, fulfill me. And in that we kind of almost drug ourselves with food, with entertainment, and with all these things. So owing to the aliveness in Ashupati, all these sheaths also became more and more alive, especially the deeper sheaths, which usually are not even kind of, noticed. They are just felt unnoticed throughout a lifetime. The only sheath that we are available to is the physical sheath, and then slowly we become available to the mental layer, and then slowly to the emotional vital layer, and then slowly going deeper to the bliss that is ever present, right? So all these became more and more alive, and they were not sleeping under the drug or the inconscience of the matter. So if you have anything to share, because it's too much that I shared, just feel free. Yeah. So parallelly, as we were talking, parallelly, the core of the being, the soul, is living through all these sheets. And it is amazing to see that how we ignore who we truly are. Who we truly are, this is this aliveness, is this pure beingness that shines through each and every movement in my body, in my thoughts, in my feelings. And yet I fail to see it. It's almost like, if we go to watch a movie, and we have seen the movie, we have come back, and we fail to notice that there was this screen also on which the movie was happening. Without the screen, the movie is not happening. The movie has no space to happen, right? So without this aliveness, the life is not there. And yet we fail to notice this as ourselves, rather than taking as ourselves as the body, as the, the thought or sense perceptions or the feelings. And again, not saying that they are not part of us. They are also part of awareness only, because everything is arising from awareness. So thought and feeling is also arising from awareness. But if we go deeper and deeper back, like if we trace our steps back, we see ourselves more and more as that pure, untouched awareness in which all the sense perception are arising. I am not the sense perception first. I am making it possible for the sense perception to happen. So that itself is a liberation in itself. Immediately I am able to dissociate from the drama of my life and maybe able to uh, live a life which is a little less burdened at one moment of time.
In the dead walls closing us from wider self, into a secrecy of apparent sleep, the mystic tract beyond our waking thoughts, a door parted, built in by matter's force, releasing things unseized by earthly sense, a world unseen, unknown by outward mind, appeared in the silent space of the soul.
Yeah. Throughout our life, it almost actually appears that it's a dead wall which is not letting me know who I truly am. And I keep on missing the very obvious. It's really amazing that uh, how we keep on missing the space throughout our lifetime. We look at buildings, we look at offices, we look at the dramas, the theater, and all that. And in all that, we keep on missing the space which is making all that possible. And this dead wall, in the dead wall, closing us from wider self into a secrecy of apparent sleep, the mystic tract beyond our waking thoughts, a door parted, built in by matter's force, a door which was actually built by the forces of matter, releasing things unseized by earthly sense. So the mind cannot fathom. If I try to understand knowing, pure perception, or being aware by my mind, it is not a possibility. Because mind is coming off matter. Mind is matter, right? Mind is matter. There is no difference between mind and matter. We think that mind is subtler than matter, but they are not unrelated. They are two interconnected. They are one with each other. So this mind, my limits of the mind, do not let me see what is beyond the mind. Because for that, the mind will have to cease in that moment. The mind will have to almost die to itself in that moment in which pure perception is happening. As if I have to put, I'm wearing yellow colored goggles, and if I really want to look at what snow is like, I have to put off the goggles. It is not a possibility that I get to know what snow is like, the true nature of snow, the true color of snow, wearing the yellow colored goggles. So I will be perceiving snow always as something else. But that would not be pure knowing of the snow. So this is how mind works. Mind has its own uh, works to do in this life, earthly life. But mind is not everything. It's like, imagine that I've been given a tool, maybe a digger or something, like a really interesting tool. And wherever I go, I keep on using this tool. I eat with that tool, I bathe with that tool. So it is actually the abuse of that tool that I am doing. And one must, I think this is our journey, that we have to learn to drop mind. And this is what self mastery is about, to drop the mind immediately when it is not needed. But the way we live mostly is we are not able to drop mind. And then life gives us experiences when we are dumbfounded. The mind is clueless. The mind has no idea what is going on. And only then, in those moments of hopelessness and helplessness, we get a taste of mind falling silent. And that is a blessing in disguise. And we get to know that yes, a living is possible even when the mind is not active, in engaged in thoughts. So this wall, dead wall, is the obscurity of the mind, of the sense perceptions that do not allow the direct perception to be. They kind of obscure the direct perception, right? In the dead wall closing us from the wider self, and the wider self is always there. It is never absent even for a moment. But it is just that as if I am living in a enclosure all the time, the enclosure of my own mind, my own story. In the dead wall closing us from wider self into a secrecy of apparent sleep. Now where Ashupati is going, he's moving within his being where something is apparently asleep. Apparently asleep. What is that something? When I was reading these lines, I was reminded of the sleep of Vishnu. In the Shir Sagar, he's sleeping, and the whole world is his dream. So when we go deeper and deeper into our being, like this, I get in touch with something which is apparently asleep. The pure light of knowing. It appears to be asleep, but it is not. It was never asleep. And this is what Ashupati is waking up to. The mystic tract beyond our waking thoughts. Now, this is very interesting. We call ourselves as I am waking. When I get up in the morning, I am awake. That is what we call. And what we enter into is another sleep, and the sleep is the sleep of thoughts. So I may call myself as a waking person, but I'm actually asleep if I am asleep to the wider self, if I am asleep to the true being who I am. And the almost so much part of our life is gone thinking that I am waking, lost in my thoughts and sensations and stories, and yet I am asleep to what I should be waking up to, the wider self. The mystic tract beyond our waking thoughts. A door parted now for Ashupati, as if a door opened into this new domain built in by matter's force, releasing things unseized by earthly sense. And that door, when it opened, it released things which were never seized or grasped by earthly sense of thought, of feeling, of sensation, which is beyond our normal understanding, the way we usually understand things. A world unseen, unknown by outward mind. Why the outward mind? Because the mind is always focusing or attending on something. That is why outward mind. Either it is focusing on outer objects, sense perceptions, or when we focus within, say for example, I am sitting in meditation, then we go even into subtler perceptions, right? I am feeling my own inner movements. I am feeling inside my own inner movement of thoughts up and down. Those are also, although the mind has turned within, but it is still very outward. Although that step is absolutely necessary, but that is again, the mind is focusing on now the sense perceptions within the being. So the matter is actually the same. Earlier the mind was focusing on the outward things. Now the mind says, okay, wahan nahi mila kuch, chalo andar chalte hain. And then you go within, and within you try to now find more and more interesting experiences through meditation and all that. So the mind is still seeking. The mind has not yet come to rest. But what now opened for Ashupati is a world unseen, unknown by outward mind. appeared in the silent spaces of the soul. This is our true home. And not to say that one just has to relax and keep relaxing throughout a life in the true home. That is not even a possibility. Whenever we find moments of relaxation, whenever we might find that we have time to ourselves, we should bask more and more in these moments of silence and stillness within, where the mind is not seeking. It is neither seeking inward meditational experiences, nor it is having any hope from the external situations. So the mind is at rest. And when we spend a few moments there in our true home, then whenever we come out and have to interact in worldly matters, something changes. Something changes and keeps on changing throughout a lifetime. And this is the gap that needs to be filled through yoga. That the more and more I'm knowing myself as that calm and stillness, and the more it has to come out in my behavior, in my actions, in my speech, in my words, and all that. And obviously, it takes a lot of time, lot of time. But that should not give us an excuse that time lagega to abhi galat kar le. The more and more we can do, whatever capacity, slowly, gradually, we must keep on kind of almost pushing ourselves further and further. So this is what opened up for Ashwapati. We'll take the last few lines. Yeah.
He sat in secret chambers looking out into the luminous countries of the unborn, where all things dreamed by the mind are seen and true, and all that the life longs for is drawn close.
Yeah. So as if it's like an image, beautiful image, that as if he's sitting in that inward cave, the secret chamber, sanctum sanctorum. He's sitting there, still, calm, poised. And from there, he's having a vision which has opened up to him. He sat in secret chambers, and now from there, he is looking out, right, to the manifested world. He sat in his secret chambers looking out into the luminous countries of the unborn. Now he is able to see things which are not yet manifested uh, in this world that we live in. They are there, but they are not manifested for our own world. The infinite possibilities possible for the man, the our higher possibilities into the luminous countries of the unborn, though as if we are living as our true selves, the one who is never born and never dies, where all things dreamed by the mind, all the possibilities dreamed by the mind, all the ideas, all the imaginations are seen and true. Yes, there is a world where people are absorbed in God's ecstasy. And he was able to look at those worlds manifest in front of his eyes. That yes, they are a possibility with certitude. And that is why mother says when she talks about younger children that children imagine so much. They imagine things which adult mind cannot imagine. The adult mind which lives in reason, intellect, and boundaries and control. A child's mind is not there. So he would dream that why can't I have wings? He can dream of having wings. And mother says, very, being very sensitive to children, mother says that never ever say to a child that this imagination is not a possibility. This is something which I was fortunate to know in the beginning, when kids were still young, and they are still young, but I have been reminding myself of this, that whatever they imagine of is a possibility. So I use this, like, whenever they say, like, put up an imagination in front of me and share it, then I when they ask me whether it is possible, so I always say that, it must, if it has occurred in your imagination, it must be a possibility. It is happening somewhere. It may be a different fact that I am not aware that, right now I can go there and see it. But if it has occurred in my imagination, definitely it is a possibility. So this is how mother shares that we must never discourage or disparage children to imagine what they want to imagine, because children are not of our own generation. They are of generations far, far beyond than us. And what they imagine is not what we can imagine. So let them, at least, if we cannot support them much, at least not, kind of prohibit them from imagining and supporting in whatever ways possible. So these are the worlds, the almost seeming impossibilities that appear now true and seen. It's almost, they talk of Trikal Drishti, where you are standing in this eternity, this timeless time, where you can see past, present, future all at once. It's like one stream of a river. They are not separate. They are just happening all at once. So he's able to see that future right now in his eyes, in front of his eyes. That yes, it is, I see it happening. Where all things dreamed by the mind are seen and true, and all that life longs for is drawn close. What does a life long for? We long for an unchanging happiness. We long for true love in relationships and with ourselves. We long for more and more peace. We long for more and more oneness with the divine, with ourselves. And we long for, uh, beauty and truth. So and we long for progression. We want to evolve and evolve and evolve. There is this inherent need in us to evolve, go beyond our thresholds. All that was drawn close when Ashwapati saw this, sitting in his secret chambers. All that became alive for him. And this is a gift of living by the Spirit, living in the Spirit. That life becomes an unfoldment. Life does not remain a monotone. जो कल हुआ था वो आज भी होना है. Not necessarily. Yeah. Yes, anything so far? Yes. I think I'm done for today. If there is anything, share, and else we'll call it a day. Okay. Great, then thank you for joining. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you. Bye-bye.